We're going to have our panel next to discuss this existential crisis facing ad tech and the opportunity for the future of the industry. And Terry's on the panel as well. And we've got Brian and Bill, so give them a round of applause to the stage. Should have a guitar here and start playing a song. So thank you, Terry, for that warm-up. Interesting sort of analysis. What we're going to do here is talk about sort of ad tech and it's sort of where it's going to go, its future. And the one thing that's kind of been thrown about quite frequently over the last 12 to 24 months is the idea of ad tech being SaaS, right? The idea that we can license ad tech out. So I'll just jump over to you, Bill, and then we can walk away to Brian and Terry. But let's talk about this concept, right? Because, you know, we have a group here on WhatsApp, and every day we talk about SaaS and how much bullshit's involved because everybody's managing media, everybody's taking IOs. So, I mean, is this actually a reality? Can our industry or can the technology in our industry actually become pure play SaaS models?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, from our perspective, in terms of digital ad tech, there's not a lot of software companies out there. Number one, if you're taking insertion order business, you're not a software company. Bill Gates said, software is the great combination of artistry and engineering. I think as an industry, from a digital ad tech perspective, I think from an artistry perspective, we get an A+. From an engineering perspective, we get a C-. Companies just are not built for scale. I would argue there's a handful of companies that are. I would, as much as it pains to compliment my fellow panelists, I would say AppNexus is one of them, but it's one of the very, very few.
Brian, you're the only SaaS business in the business, apparently. Is that true?
I don't know. I do want to be on your WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
I promise you I'll talk at least as much shit as you do.
That would be hard.
No, I promise.
Okay.
As an engineer, I guess I love the ad tech space because we can actually use technology to influence billions of people. Every time we make a change in an algorithm or code, we can literally see the impact multiplied by billions. And later on, our chief data scientist, Catherine Williams, will be talking about some of the changes we made to protect our marketplace against bad actors in the space. And the scale of change is just incredible. So I think it's hard to use financial terms like SaaS, which is a very specific way of talking about a business model where you look at monthly recurring and annual recurring revenue, because most of us don't sell software on license basis. AppNexus actually does have a good chunk of our revenue from YieldX, which we acquired earlier this year, which is a pure subscription model. We have a large publisher ad serving business, which looks more like SaaS, although many of the contracts are based on a CPM. And if you look at our overall revenue, I haven't seen it recently, but 40 or 50% of our overall revenue as a company, the net revenue, is not derived from any kind of rev share. And I believe that it's less about SaaS and it's more about this question of, are you taking money out of the pocket of the publisher or the marketer? In other words, if you look at the classic burn down chart of the dollar where different pieces go to different vendors, I think we're looking at a world where in 3 to 5 years, if more than about 5 to 10% of that money goes away between the marketer and the publisher, there's something seriously wrong. And I know, Bill, you guys operate on a very, very low effective take rate. If you look at something like YieldX, where 40 of the largest publishers in the world use the software, if you did the math on the take rate for YieldX, you would be very hard pressed to find even a single percentage point. And I think that's real. I think if you look at TV, Terry, I loved your chart. I mean, $70 billion of TV money fuels how much technology? There are companies that do tech for TV, but it is a tiny fraction. And I think we have to get used to that, and that's going to drive us to different business models. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's even worthwhile to say, oh, you took an IO, you're bad. It's more about, well, look, when the market compresses and margins go down to that single-digit level, which companies will survive, which companies will thrive, and which ones will be on the bloody side of Terry's slide? I doubt they're dead. I think they're in pain. And as we all know, it sucks to be in pain.
Is that the transition from like a media-based business to this type of business is a difficult transition, Terry. It's like, we've seen Rocket Fuel are a good example. A company that was valued at $3 billion and now worth like $250 million. You had a company like Millennial Media, and I hate to use Millennial Media as an example, but they had a valuation of $2 billion and now they were sold for $250, $260, I can't remember what it was. So, I mean, that managed IO business is hampering valuations clearly. I mean, clearly there's a perception among buyers that you need to have this kind of scale licensed business or tech-only business as opposed to a managed service business.
So, look, I think Brian makes a good point, which is it's technology, it's not SaaS. I mean, this sector kills me. The B2B marketing hype in this sector, I just chuckle because, and it's all based on perceived strategic value or exits or valuation multiples. You recall years ago, everyone wanted to be a DSP. Oh boy, I'm a DSP. And then the very same freaking companies called themselves exchanges because that was the hot ticket term, right? Then all of a sudden it was, oh no, we're DMP, but we're really DMP. And now everyone's like SaaS. Our SaaS business, I'm like, give me a break.
Oh gosh, and who was it who made the slide that said
I know, and now they're skipping all over it. It's like, I'm going to go into that box. That
was my question. Have you sold a DSP or a DMP?
Yes. But they were
eating their
really
own dog
SaaS
food.
businesses.
Nice.
No, this notion of SaaS, it's nonsense. First of all, if anybody's saying that they're a SaaS business, I'm like, really? So you're a SaaS business? So you're a subscription in an industry that has hundreds of billions of impressions per day. So the transaction volume in this industry is sky high and growing rapidly, and you want to take a fixed monthly subscription, you're an idiot. So anyone truly on a SaaS model would be an idiot.
Why'd you sell a Seal Decks then?
No, that was different. I'm saying if on the ad intermediation side, you should be in the technology space, but getting a transaction price because you're going to have a lot more operating leverage that way.
Okay.
He tried to sell me Yieldex too.
You tried to say who?
I
Media
didn't even call you. You actually called me and said you didn't call me.
Okay, there's deals going on. I have no idea what's going on. It's they're trying to sell each other to the companies. It feels to me that everyone's a platform, right? Everybody's got a platform. A piece of technology, and then they say we're a platform. We do this, we do that. What do you have to like the idea of a platform? I mean, do you think that people are misusing this word? The idea of a real platform for me is the ability to build on top of, right, and sort of use the platform to build your business, to empower your business. Do you think that there is a lot of sort of confusion out there, Bill, around what constitutes a proper platform, and is that confusing the sort of the constituent players, i.e., the publishers, the agencies, the marketers?
I believe by that definition, ExchangeWire is a platform.
Yeah, we are a platform.
A great platform. I would say in terms of platform, there's way too much fragmentation in the market for a single platform to rule the way in other media types that a Nielsen or a Mediaocean in terms of TV. Which I think over the next few years as the market matures and we go through that maturation phase, the question is going to be who has built technology at scale. And those who are, I think 5 years ago, it was a benefit to be a startup because you were nimble, you were quick, you can create innovation in ways that the larger incumbents could not. And I think over the next 5 years, it's going to be a detriment to be a startup because scale is going to matter, and I think the scale players are going to win market share. And then I think we'll be at a point in which platform players emerge, but right now there's just way too much fragmentation, way too much choice.
So there's too many point solutions, you think?
Way too many point solutions,
right.
And not a common currency by which they can all interoperate.
Brian, I mean, you've been pushing this open platform thing for quite a while, so and there's plenty of business to build on top of it. Do you think that we as an industry need to have more openness in the space, the ability to build on top, and maybe 3 or 4 large platforms, the way that they build on Salesforce or Adobe, etc.? Or do you think the point solution still is the way to go?
I think it's very interesting that even in the biggest companies in the world, most of them are platforms. They're very very many of them are. I mean, take an Alibaba, which is effectively a platform for small businesses all across China to buy and sell. They're actually a platform business. eBay is obviously a platform business in that way. I agree with Bill that there's a lot of advantage to scale, especially if you're selling media, where you need to build relationships and do things that it does require a certain amount of concentrated effort to go penetrate into an agency. But that said, we also are in a very innovative time. If you look at things like native advertising or the rise of video or programmatic TV or any of these things we're talking about, even the list of 8 issues that Terry put up a few minutes ago, every one of those is being addressed by more than one company on the AppNexus platform and in the AppNexus ecosystem. The only way that the ecosystem gets smaller is when the platforms, if you will, begin to acquire and build some of those solutions. So what you often have in platform markets is you see that the core platform does basic things, and if it's well customizable and extensible, you'll see many companies push the boundaries. Some of those become self-sustaining businesses. Some of those become part of the platforms. And that's what we're in right now, is this really interesting push-pull of consumer behavior, which is the pull, where consumers go to mobile or decide to watch TV on their phones. Many of you are doing that right now, which is nice. And then industry has to catch up and find an answer. And so I've found actually that with AppNexus, so many times someone will call up and say, do you support native? And we'll say yes, but you have to work with one of our partners. And that's an extremely high leverage way for us to innovate without actually having to take risk on one of the many different approaches to that market.
Do you think, let's be honest here, there's not many European companies that can raise $200 million. And Terry was talking about the pitiful investment that's available here to build tech and to scale tech. So, a lot of us in the room would have to depend on the platforms, whether it's a DoubleClick or whether it's an AppNexus or whether it's a Rubicon or whether it's Mediaocean, whoever, to build their business. But do you think that we, as the next layer up, have a future in this space? In the sense that if there's lots of consolidation in the tech side, do you think that some of the players, third-party players, can survive and have reputable businesses and successful businesses? That's a question for Brian there.
Yeah, sure. They should, if they can build a business that can live with low take rates. If you think about not just the traditional media channels, but let's talk about the most mature digital channel, search. The take rates in search are enumerated in basis points. They're not even 1%. And so I think that's the future for many of these companies, to build scalable technology with reasonable take rates that take into account a large and mature marketplace with lots of spend.
Let me add something, though. One thing we've seen that's been very effective in Europe is that companies here have been more interested in taking advantage of innovation than we've seen some U.S. companies try to do. So in the US, if you have an idea, you raise a bunch of money and try to build it, often in a vacuum, because it's seen as weak to rely on someone else's stack. We haven't seen that in Europe. And while Nigel will be mad at me if I mention Media IQ, his competition in today's personality game, they are a great example of a company that's really been happy to work on top of platforms to really build and innovate. And one thing you'll see from us, at least, over the next 6 to 12 months, is the release of more and more powerful capabilities that in some cases we don't know what to do with. Here in London in June, we announced our programmable bidder, our Bonsai programming language, where you can, for the first time, create your own custom algorithm and push that into our real-time systems. And we can actually bid using your own algorithm in microseconds. Now, one of the problems of this is we literally don't know what it can do. Our data science team is working on it. We have 15 or 16 companies now worldwide who are using our technology, and they're actually beating us to market. So as an example, Xaxis has models that are in production that are more sophisticated than the models we've built on top of our own technology. And this is happening actually as much, if not more, in Europe than it is in the US. There's more innovation here.
Do you think the big platform companies or the big consolidated platforms have a responsibility to help push innovation, give the people the tools to build this?
Absolutely. Who else is going to do it? Who can afford the kind of technology it takes to basically take an incredibly complex model and push it out into 8,000 servers worldwide? Just the idea of having 8,000 servers worldwide is out of reach for most companies. Doing this with, I think is really cutting-edge computer science to allow it to be possible. I tried to do this at Right Media 7 or 8 years ago, and it was literally impossible. Computers weren't fast enough. Moore's law has brought the cost of computing down, and to be honest, I couldn't find anyone who was smart enough to figure out the algorithms. So we have to create these new innovations, and then we have to rely on the marketplace to figure them out. We hope that marketers ask for them. We hope that there are companies, whether venture funded or seed funded, or God forbid, profitable, who actually use these technologies and pull them into the marketplace. And I'm going to keep doing it because there's 3 or 4 more big, crazy new technologies that I'm working on that I want to put out there. I don't know what they're going to do, but I'm certain that you and others like you around the world are going to find interesting ways to use them.
But Brian brings up a good point, which goes back to your earlier question around a platform. A true platform player has to be open, and has to be open to allow innovation that may actually conflict with your own innovation, right? And that level of system.
Like building tools that conflict with your own tools.
Absolutely.
You're happy to be,
if you're going to be a systems integrator, you need to be open to all systems integration. And I think that brings up an interesting point because the likely players who have the scale and who have the engineering talent are Google and Facebook.
Yeah.
And you can't, they can't be the platform players for the industry because they're the world's largest sellers of media.
Yeah, I was about to get to that actually. Thanks, Bill, for
no problem. You want me to jump in your seat?
No, you're fine. We've seen the list of acquirers: Facebook, Yahoo, Google. These are huge media businesses. Google bought DoubleClick for 3.1 billion, but effectively give it away for free so they can have access to media. And Facebook and Yahoo have a similar strategy. So it brings back the point about ad tech being able to be independent of media. Will big ad tech companies have to be part of media to be profitable, to scale, or can they exist independently? And should they exist independently? And that's a question for Terry first.
It's in theory, yeah, sure. In a perfect world, no seller of media would be a provider of technology, monetization solutions for other publishers along the way. That's great in a textbook in a classroom, but the reality is just very different, and it'll always be different. The big players. Look, what I tell people is, there's no wonder. Google started this with the acquisition of DoubleClick and propagating or monetizing third party media. Today, Facebook, last September, a year ago, Facebook made the decision that 1.5 billion users wasn't enough. That their own on-premises media business, as enormous as it is, was not big enough, and that they needed to launch with Atlas and connected audiences and a third-party business in order to propagate it, even further. So we're always going to live in a world where the big guys will want to, do things and supply things for others. I think the real question should be, it's not whether they're selling that media, because people can make informed decisions whether they're treating it fairly or not. By the way, in 2007, when Google bought DoubleClick, there was like a notion in the marketplace. I called it the ABG movement, right? Anything but Google. They were worried that they were going to play a heavy hand, and I will tell you that the ensuing sort of 7 or 8 years has been, people were mildly surprised to the positive. Are they doing something here and there? Maybe, but in general, people view DoubleClick's technology as relatively neutral. I think, Facebook might be different. And by the way, Comcast in the TV world buying Freewheel, I would say the ABC movement may be more visceral than the ABG movement, just because Google's a competitive company. Comcast is a natural monopoly. So it depends on how they treat the ecosystem. It's one thing that they're selling media and intermediating. If they do that on a relatively fair basis, I think people are okay with that. The question is, are they treating the broader ecosystem fairly?
Brian, you obviously founded Right Media and it was subsequently sold to Yahoo. So do you think that ad tech will always be connected to big media companies? Or is there a future for independent?
Well, I think there's this divide that Terry talks eloquently about of ad tech, which has very deep ties to media. It's very hard to distinguish that from IOs in the media business versus the marketing technology idea, or even the publisher technology space. People laugh and say, well, there's only one publisher ad server out there. That's not true. AppNexus has assembled a world-class publisher yield management solution that big companies are starting to really think seriously about ripping out DoubleClick for, because it has nothing to do with Google. It has to do with, can this technology make me more money, help me future-proof my business in ways that DoubleClick can't? And to your point, Terry, Google is playing fair. That's great. But are they innovating, and are they solving these problems? I think on the buy side as well, we have great relationships with many of the agencies. Here in the UK, we work very closely with Aegis, with Acumen, with Xaxis, with Group M, and we have this technology solution that helps them compete with Google, because they see Google as an existential threat. I don't think it's going to work for them necessarily to say we're not going to work with Google, because Google does have good products, but at the same time, I think they have to have a solution that allows them not to go back to the madman era. And so I really do think that being anything but Google is a bad idea. Finding something better than Google is the only way that most people in this room are going to have jobs in 5 years. And so that's where innovation really matters. This conference will be a lot smaller in the Google world, but
I'm preparing for that. I'm preparing for that future. Bill, it's very obvious in this part of the world that the walled gardens are starting to creep in. You had effectively the old media plan business, which basically was an IO based, and you go in and you entertain the media planner buyers. You take them to large parties at Fabric, 1,500 people on a Wednesday night, and spend like I don't know how much, 150 grand. Good job, AOL. Good party. But you entertain them, and you got your IOs effectively. It seems to me that we're kind of creeping back to that old business. Like, people you've seen Google basically cut off third-party access to YouTube inventory, right? As an example. Mm-hmm. You're seeing companies sort of building these sort of wall gardens and not allowing data to pass through various things. Amazon's a good example as well. Are we sort of regressing instead of moving forward? I mean, the idea is to kind of be able to take all the data cross-platform, do frequency capping, etc. So are we sort of moving backwards instead of forwards? And if so, what do we do as an industry to kind of help the rest of us, basically? To Brian's point, we can't all work for Amazon, Facebook, and Google.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're moving backwards, but what's happening is the large media companies and those with a lot of cash in the bank are actually acquiring technology, and as that happens, they are best to take advantage of selling media and providing ROI to buyers, because that's where all the margin sits, right? Mm-hmm. And to the point earlier, there's way too much tax that's sitting in the middle. We as an industry cannot be operating at 15, 20, forget about 40, 50% margin off of billings. We have to be in the single digits. I would argue, low single digits. Mediaocean operates at 1/4% overall. If you take an average ad tech company, and let's just say 4x our rate at 1%, you got to control. I mean, just at $1 billion, your take rate's only $10 million. So how many companies are now you have to be generating tens of billions of dollars of media just to actually have a viable business plan. So number one, the market's not big enough. Number two, there's way too much fragmentation for the math to work. And number three, companies are not building for scale. So the media companies intelligently are taking advantage of the fact that companies can't scale. Companies can't get to profitability on their own, particularly when there's going to be compression in terms of margin happening over time. Which is why when I started, the companies with scale are going to end up winning market share. And to Brian's point, we have to out-engineer the big media players.
But we are, if you're from a marketer or an agency perspective, it's kind of a nightmare scenario. You've got 8 different UIs now for display, and the idea was you had a DSP, whether it was a MediaMath or an AppNexus or a DBM or whatever, and the idea was to plug into all these different platforms, use your data intelligently. But we're actually going back now. We have like Amazon closed off, Facebook potentially closed off, Google, and it's their little ecosystems. But it just feels to me we're not, that's not progress. We're just kind of going back to the old specific Adconian media plans, effectively.
Well, look, I actually think we are going backwards in the sense that if there's a platform out there that insists that you use their ad server and you can't use the generally accepted usable ad server in the marketplace and plug into their particular first-party system, if they require you to use a different one, happens to be owned by them, then guess what? It's not like advertisers are all of a sudden going to change their ad server on whole. They will for purposes of purchasing that media, but guess what? Now there's going to be a frickin' new box on the Lumascape that has to tick and tie between the two ad servers so that marketers can run holistic ad campaigns. This is, adding another box to the Lumascape, that is going backwards. I'm sorry.
Somebody
Progress
tweet
for
that.
you, but Terry, no. But the company itself. Brian, what do you think?
What was the question?
The question was, are we regressing instead of progressing? The idea that all these walled gardens just add another layer of complexity and reduces inefficiency, and then the whole idea of data-driven buying is thrown out the window because you have 17 different UIs you have to plug into for their mini ecosystems.
Are we regressing? Ad tech and this industry is cyclical. And it also has really interesting dynamics because the growth of, let's say, programmatic over the past decade has far exceeded the growth of the industry as a whole. And so there's these trends. And programmatic is slowing dramatically on a percentage basis. And so we're at the peak of a cycle. And at the peak of the cycle, you can ask the question, how much money has been invested in this cycle? And in this case, a lot. How much profit is being generated by those different companies who are at the peak? Not very much. And how many of them are tired and want an exit? All of them. And the real question becomes, it's true, and so Bill's smiling because he just got one. Some of us are still working for it. So I think the challenge is that we are regressing only because of where we are in the cycle, and that many industries grow this way: 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Right now we're having the 1 step back, but the next cycle is already starting. And there's more startups that have, been reaching out for funding than I've seen in a while in this space. I think there's companies that are starting with a new reality of lower take rates. The companies that are at scale are desperately looking for ways to find profit and growth so that they can tell Wall Street that they're going to grow at some certain rate for some certain period of time to sustain a valuation or to get an exit. And, I think it's natural to see this step back. But what Terry said is exactly right, which is the second that Google closes off YouTube to DBM, everyone who uses DBM says, great, But the second time somebody closes something off and you have to use 2 different platforms, there is going to be a third layer. And that layer may be the ad server. It may be something that's post-ad server. But there's definitely not going to be a independent technology like an ad server that is only able to work in certain ecosystems. It just doesn't make sense. Right. And the question is, what third-party companies are prepared to offer something that can really be independent of the media players? I would say, AppNexus is well positioned for that. MediaMath is well positioned for that. There's probably a handful of other companies that can truly be agnostic.
But do you think you can do that without the large scale that Facebook and Google have in terms of data, the cross-device, et cetera? Are we fighting against a just insurmountable object here, particularly around mobile?
Well, is that data open or is that data closed? Is that data in the interest of consumers or not? If you basically say you can buy Facebook with Facebook data and Google with Google data, and it's cross-platform on those platforms, somebody's going to come out with a business that can, to Terry's point, tick and tie. And that business is going to look like a SEM potentially. That's how we see it in search. Google's done extraordinary things to prevent you getting access to your search data outside their ecosystem. We've seen that game play out. But I'll just ask for a show of hands, since you already have your fancy polling app. How many of you think that in 5 years, the internet will be basically Google, Facebook, Amazon, and let's be generous and say one more? 60% or more of all time consumed on the internet in 3 or 4 different major properties. Okay, how about this? Who doesn't think that's the case? Who thinks we're going to have an open, fragmented internet with lots of publishers?
Oh, a very optimistic crowd.
Okay, if that's the case, then we are not going to have to worry that much about Google and Facebook.
Listen, there's going to be massive fragmentation. However, Google and Facebook alone are already over 70% of all ad spend.
That's true. And
So,
mobile's even
and by the way,
worse.
they also own the largest ad servers that control the other 30%, right? So there could be a million publishers out there. If the supply chain only matters after 20, then who cares?
And the running joke at the agencies is, agencies don't buy mobile, they buy Facebook, because Facebook is mobile by proxy. They don't do any mobile buying, effectively.
Right, but
I remember not too many years ago, it was 2007, someone senior, prominently stood up at a conference and said, as it relates to the growth of this, hot new category called social, it's basically game over. It's all, MySpace has won, and it's, that will never change. Oops.
Yeah, that's why I never gave up my profile.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but this is the point. We're going to look back at this conversation in 5 years and say, oh my gosh, we were so naive. I don't know what's going to change. But that's why I think there's hope. Even with all the fear of all these 8 major crazy issues that we have to deal with, going back to 2007, we were exactly the same point. The peak of the last cycle, there was a feeding frenzy among giants, all of whom wanted to win. And we have a similar list of giants, probably more right now, all looking at this as the heart, the lifeblood of the internet. Something like $1 trillion worth of market cap is funded by internet advertising. Maybe it's $2 billion right now. Yeah. And if that's the case, $2 trillion of valuation being created by internet advertising, it's pretty hard for a corp dev person or a senior executive at one of these companies not to go, wow, I really want to control that, either offensively or more likely defensively. They don't want that to be controlled by people that they don't trust. And so that's really where we are in the cycle, and that's why, there's actually a pretty exciting moment. If you're sitting here seeing that show of hands and hearing the numbers, and you don't say, wow, this is a huge opportunity for me to go innovate and create a real interesting business as that fragmentation comes back into the ad spend, then maybe you should go to a different conference, because I'm pretty excited about what the next 5 or 6 years have to bring, even though it's going to be a painful path for the next couple.
Think about it. What Brian just said is this sector, companies that are innovating in this sector are providing the monetization and therefore the lifeblood of the internet, which is the future of all media and communications as we know it. You're welcome.
Terry,
right?
Terry,
I'm gonna get a hat. I was telling Brian, I'm gonna get a hat, a Trump hat. Make America great, make ad tech great again.
Okay, well listen.
That's right. I'm gonna be selling these hats.
Listen, it's fine. We've already got a catchphrase for ad tech. Ad tech, keeping the internet free since 1993. Okay,
there you go.
You're gonna use that one. You can use that one if you want in your presentation. I don't mind. So just getting back to the future. Last year we had Scott Brinker here talk about martech, right? About this. You thought your Lumascape was bad. The ecosystem of martech is insane. There's like 5,000 companies on this chart. But there's this thinking among some people that our industry, our space, will effectively be subsumed into this wider. it's a bit of a lethal object, all right? I'm kind of going. Okay. We'll be subsumed into this wider marketing technology space where marketers take more control over their tech and data. Do you see that is where our industry's heading, Bill? Is that something we're gonna be sort of? There'll be no more ad tech conferences. There will be like just a martech conference.
Well, I think it's a natural evolution, right? So, advertising is pretty specific, but if you're a CMO, it's not just about, creating a commercial and trying to move products off the shelf. It's around how do you leverage all the innovation that's happened over the last few years in terms of social, in terms of virality, in terms of YouTube, in terms of, Facebook. So if you're a CMO, it's not about advertising anymore. It is about marketing. It is about what is the cost to acquire a new customer? What is the cost to increase market share from our existing customers? So it's at that 360 view of the user and the consumer, which is where I think ad tech is just going to evolve to martech. And we've already seen it, right? So I think, for those of us who are exclusively focused on advertising, the question is, how do we evolve our businesses to also include that 360 view of the customer? Because if we don't, then we're going to lose out to the CRM guys who are clearly encroaching in on this business.
Do you think they're keen to jump to Terry's point? They're looking to jump into this space and take it.
Without a doubt.
Brian, sorry, Bill. Okay. All right, Brian, I just saw that your company is now in the martech box there on Terry's slide. So do you want to talk about your martech business?
That's the first time I've heard about it. I think it's probably good marketing. To be honest, I haven't put a lot of thought into it. I mean, we've never been very good at labeling AppNexus into a box. We've always had this vision that, there's this confluence of, data and real-time messaging to consumers that can really influence their behavior and provide extraordinary monetization for publishers, help marketers get great outcomes, and if we do it right, then we can deliver consumers something that actually makes the internet better. Now, I don't know what that's called. If you said to me 5 or 6 years ago, would messaging be part of my vision? I'd say yes. If you said, would content marketing be part of my vision? I didn't know what it was then, but I would say now, yes. If you say, hey, how about email? Sure. TV, sure. All this stuff to me fits into the same bucket of touch points with consumers where we can influence them. And if you look at that whole customer journey or whatever you want to call it, to me that's all in the same sphere of places where you need to have a real-time view of what the consumer is doing. I thought that Terry's modalities were really important, even though I'm not sure I know what the word means. But if we can figure out how these pieces fit, and that's going to be a massive, fun, big data problem, and then in real time make decisions, then we're actually ready for the world we're going to be in 10 years. So call it what you want. That's the company I want to build, and the conference that's about that is the conference that I want to go to, and I think it's the conference that all of you want to go to, that CMOs want to go to, that publishers want to go to. That's the future. And we'll just label it based on whatever Terry's newest Lumascape says.
So, Terry, what's your newest Lumascape?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the next Lumascape will be the eventual migration here as you go down the funnel. And ad tech is at the impression level, martech gets further down, sales tech. Watch for the sales tech conference. Think about it. There's only 2 principles in this whole equation. There's a marketer and a consumer. That's it. Everyone else is an agent. Publishers are agents, agencies are agents, tech companies, data companies, everyone else is an agent.
Bankers.
Although we've launched the fund, we're not going to be a principal.
The greatest middlemen of all.
And if you think about it in the context of what does the marketer, what do the 2 principals want to do with each other? What does the marketer want to do with the consumer? He wants them to buy more goods. Okay? That's the end game. Whether it's you want to do that over the long run, branding, or in the short run, direct response. But that is the end goal. Let's not lose sight of the end goal. So nobody, absolutely nobody, people at Procter & Gamble and Kellogg's and Ford don't give a crap about making immediate impressions, because those are all just proxies. They're proxies for what will be, hopefully, a conversion to a customer. That's what they care about. And the world of, the more technology, software applications, and data applications that you put into that relationship between the marketer and the consumer, the clearer the perspective they have on conversion, who converts, why they convert, when they convert. Everything else is a proxy or a tool. Media is a tool. Search is a particularly effective one. Display less so, but now becoming more effective as they're able to target and identify intent. And if you think about it in that context, the reason why ad tech is sort of, if you were looking at that sort of chart of, the cave, the ape and the Neanderthal and the human, ad tech is sort of the, paid media is but one tool. It's an important tool, don't get me wrong, with huge volumes and a lot of innovation, as Brian points out. That's all cool, but it's only one tool, right? So think about the marketer. MDF spend in the United States is twice the size of ad spend. That's all the monies that manufacturers pay to retailers to position their product in aisles and supply discounts and coupons at the retail level, which is obviously very bottom of the funnel. But I got news. This is the new end cap. This is the new aisle. And so there are already technologies being developed by marketers which take the advantage that we've got all this data on the consumer. We know who they are, we know where they are, we know what they're interested in, and we can apply dollars, which, by the way, in the hundreds of billions are getting applied to dumb things like physical end caps in stores, and now apply them in a digital context. We are just at the beginning, and paid ad spend is but one portion. Look for sales tech.
I like that. And one thing to remember is that there's 2 insights that I had that led to the invention of basically the ad exchange. One of them was that in 1999, I was working at a consulting company which did personalized marketing for people who called customer support. That was the DNA. So when you called support and the people who were answering, maybe in India or something, would read a script. And the idea was that in real time, based on what you were saying, they could actually look up all your customer data and tell the agent what to say. And if you could tell them to say the right thing, you could actually drive sales. And so this was the core real-time personalization technology was actually out there almost 20 years ago being deployed into call centers. And the project I worked on for American Express was, look, we have all this data, we model the customers, we know what they're responding to on the phone. Could you do this when they log in to our website, which was very innovative at that time? And we doubled the conversion rate on their website and produced something like $1 billion of incremental lift. But that was nothing compared to the lift they were getting on the phone, because these were real people able to make decisions where if you say, hey, you should sign up for baggage protection, and someone says, what's that? That flags and says, hey, they said, what's that? Let's tell them about baggage protection. May I have your permission to charge you $10 a month? And boom, you just made $120 a year of incremental value from a customer who's already paying you to use your credit cards. So I think that idea of coming full circle, I'm not sure which one's the ape in this case, because a lot of this stuff is actually pretty basic fundamental technology that we've adapted to more and more complex needs. But it's going to come right back to the core, which is one-to-one marketing. That was the big buzzword back in 99, 2000, was one-to-one marketing. And let me ask you, do you think that you're participating in real one-to-one marketing today? I don't think we really are. And I think that's where we're going to go.
So that's the future. We've run out of time, gentlemen. Bill, Brian, Terry, thank you very much. And a round of applause, please, for a great panel discussion.